Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at a Gloom Trinity build. Now this one is a legitimate build unlike the Wukong one, so please stick around. First, let's take a look at her abilities. We got her 1 Well of Life, which functions as a single target CC that pulses out, functioning like a lifesteal based on damage dealt by your allies. All damage done to the enemy is stored and will be dealt once it expires, or you can deactivate her 1 early and it will do it all in one go. Her 2 is Energy Vampire, the famous energy battery. It functions a lot like her 1, except it's regular fixed pulses of energy. You also cannot end this ability early. Her 3, Link, is very strong utility, making you completely immune to knockdown stuns as well as giving you up to 75% damage reduction. It stacks on top of her 4, Blessing, which reaches a 90% damage reduction. It's also our perfect form of portable auger sets, letting you regenerate your shields on demand. Finally, we have her passive, which lets you revive teammates faster and from slightly further away. However, honestly, this is pretty useless. So let's take a look at what I did with her kit. There's actually 2 builds I'm going to show you today. The first one is probably a lot more what you expect, but I feel like the second one gives a better unique spin on her kit. So on her first kit, we've decided to replace her Well of Life with Gloom as expected, as it gives us a form of very strong CC as well as a lifesteal back. The reason why we chose her 1 here is because everybody knows her 2 Energy Vampire is free infinite energy and super easy to use. Her 3 also gives you knockdown and stagger resistance, which is super handy and means you don't really have to slot in Prime Sure-Footed if you want to use it. Obviously, we're going to keep her 4 because this is the equivalent of having a Brief Respite and full Augur set all wrapped up into one ability while still giving you damage reduction. So let's take a look at how I built her. The first thing you'll notice is we actually have higher duration than you'd normally expect on a Gloom setup, as well as neutral efficiency. Now with the improvements we've had to Gloom over the past couple of hotfixes, 100 efficiency is actually sustainable, especially with the energy battery that she is. The higher duration still pushes down the drain on Gloom while significantly amplifying the range increase of it. Overall, I'd say this is a net positive on ability, but that's not all. The higher duration also means her Bless lasts longer if you choose or need to cast it, giving you 18 seconds of damage reduction. Obviously, this isn't too important at level cap scenarios, but it is still just a nice to have. This also fits very well into her Link, giving it a 21.5 base second duration, meaning you won't have to recast it as often for the anti-stagger knockdowns. Finally, this does significantly slow down the pulses from her Energy Vampire. However, it's not like you're going to tag Noxus with EV, and everything should be dying easily on a proper build anyways, which would release all of the energy in one pulse. The high strength we're slotting on is also multi-purpose. We're also running higher range, as Gloom would require both. This pushes us all the way up to a 83% slow once growing power is procced, while also reaching out to 25.6 meters. This also gives us more range as well as higher regen on her EV, so if you're playing in a team this will be much appreciated. Now if you're concerned about starting energy, you could run preparation instead of Cunning Drift. For Arcanes, I'm still going to stick to Energize, as there are a little bit of issues with this build, and having Energize available means you don't need to worry about those complications and also won't need to worry about having to cast your EV as much. Alternatively, you could run Arcane Fury if you want an initial stack on your Condition Overload melee, but I'd prefer Arcane Strike for the extra attack speed. You could even run something else, such as Pistolier, Acceleration, Velocity, etc. For your other Arcane, Nullifier is super handy since her build is only 100 efficiency, so it is a little bit on the energy hungry side and you never want to be low on that. Now some people might be finding Trinity too clunky to use on her ability cast. I agree with this, so I actually opted to drop off Augur Message so I could slot on Natural Talent instead. This way her Bless is quick and her Link is fast, as well as her EV. You won't really notice too much of an effect on Gloom though. Let's take a look at how this build plays out. So the first thing you'll probably want to do is cast your EV and then cast your Bless due to the incoming damage. You'll want to proc Growing Power and then throw up your Gloom. At this point, you're pretty safe at the start of your Steel Path Endurance since you have your damage reduction up, high energy, and your 83% slow active. Her Link, as I said, is super handy because if you do keep it up, you don't need to run Prime Sure-Footed. Otherwise, you probably want to drop Cunning Drift in the Exilis for this. Now the biggest issue about this build is when you have Gloom up, you can't get energy back from your EV, it has to be deactivated. While you can just keep killing enemies quickly and try to sustain yourself off Energize, it isn't guaranteed. So in my eyes, this is the biggest downfall. Now, as I spoke earlier about Link, if you don't want to bother keeping that cast constantly up and you don't want to run Prime Sure-Footed, well, you can run Worm instead for a negate, which blocks any status effects once every 5 seconds. Of course, you want the standard survivability, primed regen on to keep it alive longer, as well as the synth mods, which will also holster reload your new core while you're busy meleeing. Then you have your standard utility, primed animal instinct, and vacuum. We're also slotting Fire Dot because this works super well with the sentinel weapon Verglass for restoring the viral heat weighting, and then assault mode so that they actually attack. Now, as I mentioned, Verglass is probably your best bet here, as it is an insane Glaxon copy-paste that will instantly max out your viral and heat stacks when it shoots an enemy. It will basically prime anything that you can't kill yourself immediately. We got our viral heat set up, as well as prime shred so that you have a little bit of punch through to spread through crowds. I also have a Riven, but this really isn't necessary. Alternatively, if you're looking for more support builds and not necessarily the status block, you can run a Panzervault Baphyla. Over time, this will spread a decent amount of viral throughout the crowd and giving you an instant boost to your initial melee hits as well as slash procs. Now, as I mentioned previously, my biggest concern in the build was EV not working when you have Gloom up, but that's fine. I do have a alternative build that solves this problem. So let's take a look at that. Surprise, surprise, this time I actually took off EV to slot Gloom on. Who would have thought of that? And we're actually running the augment on her Well of Life. When was the last time you saw a build that actually makes use of her 1? So I actually like this build a lot because it solves a lot of problems while bringing another new way to play Trinity that people haven't used in such a long time, since people basically forget her 1 exists. Now, her 1 is insane on this build, giving you and your team, if you're playing with it, basically an infinite source of energy without having to rely on taking off your Gloom, and it even has further synergy with the rest of her kit. Now, I already did test this build. We have a bit of a lower duration, but this is perfectly fine because actually it at least matches and can even outperform the EV builds. Therefore, we only have 155 duration and 85 efficiency. Her Link does cost a little bit more, so you need to be wary of that, but at least you don't have to uncast your Gloom, so I think this trade-off is pretty good. Her Bless is also a little bit harder to cast, but hey, at least you won't have to rely on it as often. Now, her Well of Life does let you deactivate it early if you think you already killed the enemy, since it stores up all of the damage to do otherwise at the end of the duration. So in this sense, it is pretty much the same as EV, where you can get your energy refill on demand so long as you kill the enemy. We're still scaling off of her growing power since you don't need Brief Respite, as Bless functions the same way. We also have Cunning Drift on the build, but because her 1 is cheap to cast, I don't think there's any use of preparation on an endless setup. Also, because of how spammy her 1 can be, if we're gonna drop something off her natural talent, well, I'd recommend taking off Streamline. You really won't notice the penalty of 55 efficiency. We don't want to dip under 155 duration because of how short that would make Link and Bless last, and we also don't want to give up any extra range since maintaining that 25 meters on Gloom is super handy. Additionally, even though you only have 55 efficiency, you have a massive 638 energy pull because of primed flow, so you can take full advantage of this with Arcane Energize, which procs on energy orb pickups. You basically have energy orbs on demand from her 1. Although it doesn't drop energy orbs guaranteed, this also synergizes with her strength since the energy orb drop chance scales with it. Finally, because our energy regen strat is from energy orb spam, we're gonna slot on Arcane Eruption, which doesn't have a cooldown and gives an AoE knockdown to all enemies in range every single time you pick an orb up. Now, I actually wanted to showcase this originally on the Gara build with Spectro Siphon, but I completely forgot this arcane existed. On the other hand, Gara does have multiple forms of CC already from the Spectro Rage ability itself, as well as her blinding passive, whereas Trinity doesn't really have anything, so this does patch up her kit really well. Once again, as I said, you can run a Worm on this build, however there's a small difference this time. You still have the same negate and prime regen mods, but these synth mods are super important now, especially the synth fiber, because Well of Life always spits out 4 health orbs on kill regardless of strength. With synth fiber on, you can now pick up those health orbs even if you're at full health. Now on your frame, if you have Equilibrium on, health pickups also double as energy pickups. So if you produce 4 energy orbs and 5 health orbs, you're gonna get back 135 energy every single time you cast your 1, which only costs 28 energy to cast, and if Energize procs, you'll get over 300. Finally, I haven't been showing this in my builds, but do remember on Endurance, you do want to run Decay Dragon Key so that your shield regenerates to max sooner, meaning you can use Shielded Gate again sooner. However, you do have Bless, which is an instant max refill, so it doesn't have as much of an impact on Trin. Now let's take a look at build 2. This time you don't need to EV, as their 1 works fine even with Gloom up. So we're gonna tag for growing power and cast her slow, and then do a Well of Life. We get our energy back, and on top of that, as soon as they die, look at that knockdown. Most of them are dead, or we did just ragdoll anything that wasn't already. And because it doesn't have a cooldown, you can just hack away at your enemies and it'll just keep proccing and re-knocking. This stun is also multiplied by Gloom itself, so they will pretty much be spending a full 20-30 seconds in that animation. Link is still useful just as before, making you completely immune to knockdowns. However, if you're proccing Arcane Eruption, I highly doubt they'll even be able to cast it. Finally, like I said, you don't need to deactivate your Gloom to get your energy back. Unlike EV, it's just so handy. You walk right up to them, shoot them, kill them, knock things down, and then get your energy back. So the rest of this video is just footage from Steel Path showcasing the builds. This is the first one, with Gloom subsumed over her 1 and using EV instead. Now you'll need to proc EV at the start of the mission, and then cast your Bless so you don't die, tag something and cast your Slow. At this point you're free to go. Like I said, I do feel this build is lacking the CC that the second build provides, and at this point it's not really too different from the Wukong setup. The only real difference is you have Link to give you status immunity if you're willing to cast it. Otherwise you'll have to run Prime Sure-Footed. Now on Acolytes, you can't link them, so you can't get the damage transference, and well, on this case you do have Violence that fully deactivated my abilities, but that's okay. I just need to get away from her, and then I can cast my Bless and my Slow again, which once I do this, it's unlikely she'll be able to set up her silence again. They are still affected by the 95% slow, so it is decently easy to kill her off here. Acolytes don't scale with endurance, so they will always be level 135, making it a cakewalk. Like I said before though, I really don't like how I have to deactivate my Gloom here to get energy back and cast my EV, as it does create a window where your shields can be knocked down, so I would consider anti-knockdowns such as Link or Prime Sure-Footed extremely important to be present when you deactivate your Gloom. So now let's take a look at, in my eyes, the better second build. You proc growing power and immediately cast your Slow. Then you can Bless as needed. Look at that, I already had energy orbs proccing knockdowns. Well of Life something while your Gloom is up to set up your energy economy, and there you go. That's the start of your mission. The power of Arcane Eruption cannot be understated. When you see crowds and you proc your Well of Life and you shred them, you get a massive energy regen, an enemy that will store all the damage you deal to it and blow up all in one go, and an insane CC from the energy orbs that come out of it once you kill that target. Then you can just kill the other ragdolled enemies, which will drop more energy orbs, and you can just keep chaining this reaction further and further. Now the funny thing I noticed is you can actually cast Well of Life on the Acolytes. I don't know if this does anything, but you do want to unpause it at some point so that you do end up being able to deal all of your damage. It will store everything, including all of your slash ticks, so you can technically one-shot them once you deactivate it, but it's kind of just a meme. I don't think it actually affects them, as they were still moving during that time. Now on the other hand, this does mean that they can drop an energy orb and health orbs once you kill them off, and now you can stun everything around them. That's it for the Trinity video that I want to show you today. I hope you like what you saw. I really wanted to bring out a different kind of build for her second setup that I feel synergized with her kit better, and try to remind people that EV is not the only ability that exists on the build. There is an actual use for her Well of Life augment. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like, or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 75.8% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to bring you everything I know about the Tempestarii update, as well as show you any interesting and quirky builds, or these Helminth synergies with Gloom. I'll also be looking forward to keeping up with any of the future updates as they come out. You won't want to miss any of that. That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.